Mark trusted Lisa with his life, but behind her smile, she was plotting a deadly betrayal. What began as a simple morning dog walk turned into a carefully orchestrated execution that shocked a community and destroyed a life. Mark's life had always seemed ordinary, almost predictable, a rhythm that many envied. He woke up at the same time every morning, brewed his coffee just the way he liked it, and walked Buddy, his loyal golden retriever, around the quiet streets of his neighborhood. His neighbors admired him for his calm demeanor, the way he always nodded politely and smiled, even on difficult days. At work, he was known as dependable and polite, someone who never caused trouble and who quietly did his job well. Friends often commented on how lucky he was to have a stable, loving family. On the surface, nothing seemed amiss, but beneath this ordinary exterior, cracks had begun to appear, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Lisa, his wife of 8 years, had changed. She no longer lingered over breakfast with him or shared small talk about their day. She spent hours on her phone, often disappearing under the excuse of errands or visiting friends. Sometimes Mark would notice lipstick marks on her collar or smell unfamiliar perfumes on her clothes. Text messages would appear and vanish before he could ask anything, leaving explanations that never fully satisfied him. At first, he convinced himself that he was imagining things, that his mind was overreacting, that the trust and love they had built over years could not suddenly disappear. Lisa, however, was deliberate. She was no longer the woman he married, not in the way he remembered. Restless and calculating, she had begun to see her marriage not as a partnership but as a chain she wanted to escape, and she was determined to do it on her terms. Every glance, every word, every seemingly insignificant decision was a calculated step toward an end she had envisioned long before Mark even realized there was a problem. She watched him carefully, understanding his routines, studying his habits, noting his trust in her, and recognizing how predictable he truly was. The idea of the morning dog walk, something that had once been a bonding ritual for them, became part of her plan. She suggested it casually, as if it were a spontaneous idea to spend time together. Mark, unaware of her intentions, embraced it eagerly. The walks began simply, a ball toss for Buddy, the crisp morning air, the gentle sunlight filtering through the trees. But each step, each familiar path, was part of a carefully orchestrated design. Lisa was preparing, with patience and precision, a trap masked as normalcy. Mark, trusting as ever, could not have imagined that the peaceful routine he loved most would become the stage for a betrayal that would change his life forever. Morning walks with Buddy had become the centerpiece of Mark's daily life. Each day, he followed the same route through the neighborhood park, feeling comfort in the predictability. The fresh air, the crunch of leaves underfoot, and Buddy's excited energy offered him a brief escape from the stresses of work and the subtle unease growing in his marriage. Lisa often accompanied him, suggesting slight changes in direction or encouraging him to take a longer path, but always in a way that seemed casual and harmless. Mark appreciated her company, not realizing that each suggestion was carefully calculated, part of a larger design that he could not yet see. Lisa's manipulations grew more sophisticated over time. She studied Mark's habits intently, noting the moments when his attention was divided, the points along the trail where cell phone signals were weak, and where park surveillance cameras rarely reached. She observed his patterns without him ever suspecting, gradually weaving herself into his routines so seamlessly that he saw her presence as comforting rather than controlling. Every gesture she made, every smile she offered, was layered with subtle intent, designed to disarm him and reinforce his sense of trust. Even the way she handled Buddy calling him gently or pretending to toss a ball was part of a rehearsal, conditioning Mark to associate safety and normalcy with her presence. Meanwhile, Lisa's research extended beyond observation. Late at night, she scrolled through forums, watched videos about criminal behavior, and read articles detailing methods of manipulation. She considered every variable, from timing to environment, imagining every potential obstacle and planning contingencies. Her obsession with detail was relentless. Mark remained oblivious, confident in his life, in his routine, and in the person he had married. The tension was growing like a slow undercurrent beneath the calm surface of their mornings, but he felt nothing, trusting the ordinary in a world that was quietly turning extraordinary in its danger. Each day, The park walk became a rehearsal of sorts. Lisa tested his reactions, adjusted her timing, and noted the exact moments when he was most distracted, most compliant. It was invisible to him, the way a spider's web is invisible until it catches its prey. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the routine that had once brought Mark joy began to serve a darker purpose. The park, the trees, the winding trail, everything familiar was becoming the stage for a plan that had been decades in the making in her mind. Mark's trust, once his greatest strength, was now the very tool that Lisa would wield to draw him closer to a fate he could never have imagined. On the morning that would change everything, Mark set out with Buddy like any other day. The air was crisp, the sun barely over the horizon, casting long shadows across the familiar paths of the park. Lisa was waiting at the usual meeting spot, casually leaning against a tree, holding a coffee cup, radiating calmness. Her demeanor was perfectly ordinary, as if this was just another morning together. Mark's heart felt light. He had no reason to suspect that the ordinary routine he cherished had been twisted into a carefully orchestrated trap. As they walked, Lisa subtly guided him toward a secluded section of the park, one lined with dense trees and thick underbrush. She suggested small detours under the guise of giving Buddy more room to run, her voice casual, almost playful. Mark followed, tossing the ball for Buddy and admiring the beauty of the early morning. The deeper they went, the fewer people they encountered. The usual joggers and dog walkers had not yet arrived, and the faint sounds of distant traffic were muffled by the trees. Mark felt a strange sense of serenity, completely unaware that every step brought him closer to danger. Lisa's preparation was meticulous. She had planned the exact route, timing each moment so that no passerby would interfere. Hidden tools, carefully concealed, waited at precise locations. Even the placement of rocks and fallen branches had been considered, creating subtle obstacles that masked the true purpose of the path. Her attention to detail was extraordinary. Every variable she could control had been controlled. Mark's movements, his trust, his very habits had been studied and mapped. He walked with complete faith, believing he was simply following the routine they had shared for months, not realizing that each familiar step had been weaponized against him. As they reached the most secluded area, the trap closed. The quiet of the park, which had always been comforting, now amplified the danger. Lisa's calm exterior never faltered, her eyes fixed ahead, her expression perfectly ordinary. Mark, absorbed in tossing the ball for Buddy and admiring the sunlight filtering through the trees, remained completely unaware of the calculated peril surrounding him. He trusted the woman he loved, blind to the fact that this trust had been exploited, leading him step by step into a situation from which there would be no easy escape. By the time Mark sensed that something was off, it was already too late. The elements of the trap, invisible until triggered, had been set perfectly. Every moment of preparation, every subtle manipulation, every careful observation of his habits, had converged into this single point. What had seemed like an ordinary dog walk had become the stage for an execution, and the man who had trusted completely was now entirely at the mercy of a plan he could never have anticipated. The aftermath of that morning was chilling, leaving the community in disbelief. Mark's absence was first noticed when he failed to return home for lunch, an unusual break in his dependable routine. Neighbors began calling, and friends started checking in, only to find no answer. By afternoon, the park authorities were alerted, and a search began. It was Buddy who led the way, wandering nervously near the trail where Mark had last been seen. The scene that greeted the investigators was horrifying in its clarity. Mark had fallen victim to a meticulously planned crime, executed with precision and calm that sent a shiver through everyone involved. Detectives quickly turned their attention to Lisa. Her calmness after Mark's disappearance initially seemed natural, but small inconsistencies in her story began to surface. Surveillance footage from the park and nearby streets, once considered routine, revealed subtle movements and behaviors that contradicted her account. Investigators began piecing together a timeline, comparing it with phone records, location data, and witness statements. Each detail revealed more about the careful orchestration that had led Mark to that secluded area. The evidence painted a picture of cold calculation. Lisa had studied his routines, observed his reactions, and crafted every detail of the walk to serve her purpose. Her manipulation of trust, her ability to disguise intention behind normalcy, and her careful timing were all laid bare. Forensic experts examined the site, uncovering tools and objects hidden to facilitate the crime. Every item, from the placement of small obstructions on the path to the timing of events, suggested a level of planning that went beyond a momentary lapse in judgment. Psychologists consulted on the case described the crime as the ultimate form of betrayal, a manipulation of trust so precise that the victim had no chance of recognizing danger until it was too late. Forums and social media were flooded with analysis, theories, and commentary on the psychological elements of the crime. Experts highlighted the danger of manipulation within intimate relationships, pointing out that even ordinary routines could be turned into tools for control or harm. Mark's story became a cautionary tale, a grim reminder that betrayal can hide behind familiarity, and that the ordinary can mask extraordinary danger. The small, quiet park, once a place of comfort, would forever be associated with the meticulously executed cruelty that had ended a life and shattered a community's sense of safety. The trial of Lisa drew nationwide attention, capturing the public's fascination and horror in equal measure. Courtrooms were packed with spectators, journalists, and legal experts eager to witness how a story that began with a simple dog walk could culminate in premeditated murder. From the moment proceedings began, it was clear that the prosecution had built a meticulous case. They presented evidence showing the planning, the careful observation, and the calculated manipulation that had led Mark to his fate. Each piece of evidence, phone records, surveillance footage, hidden tools, and detailed notes demonstrated that Lisa's actions were deliberate, not impulsive. Psychologists and criminal behavior experts testified about the psychological intricacies of her manipulation. They described how she had exploited Mark's trust, how she had conditioned him over months to follow routines that ultimately led him into danger. The jury was shown the contrast between the loving spouse Mark had known and the calculating individual who had orchestrated his death. The evidence left little doubt. This was a crime executed with precision, leveraging familiarity, trust, and the illusion of safety. In the end, the jury found Lisa guilty on all counts. Her sentence reflected the severity and premeditated nature of the crime: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The case became a cautionary tale, not only of betrayal, but also of the vulnerabilities hidden within ordinary life. The narrative of Mark's final dog walk, a routine he had cherished, became emblematic of how subtle manipulation could be deadly. Communities, both local and national, reflected on the story with shock and fear. True crime enthusiasts dissected every detail, psychologists analyzed every motive, and the public grappled with the unsettling reality that someone's everyday trust could be exploited so thoroughly. Mark's story served as a haunting reminder that the people we believe we know best can sometimes harbor intentions so dark that they turn the familiar into the most dangerous terrain imaginable. The park, the routine, the dog walks, all ordinary parts of life had been transformed into the stage for a calculated execution, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who followed the story.